Other than having talent, he has smarts.
He is the best in Indiana high school basketball.
Oscar had to be a houdini to get that shot underway.
He was pelted continually with racial slurs.
Big old pushes one up from 35 out, it's good.
There was a new hotel. They wouldn't let Oscar check in.
Oscar's getting lifted up onto the fan out there, and the fans here in the auditorium giving him a big hand.
He had a genius to play the game.
Oscar played the game like he invented it.
The big O, love him.
Oscar had a way of getting the point across.
I said, Oscar, they gonna kill you out there, man. He said, yeah, but we're gonna win this game, though.
And I kept thinking, if we're trading away the greatest player, who do we get in return?
Oscar made my life easier, and it's good to know that I made his life easier.
You just saw the master at his craft, Oscar Robertson on a fast break.
But he had enormous imagination.
There's only one big O. He's got a statue to prove it.
The statue is Oscar Robertson, but it's for you, and you, and especially you. That's for everybody.
Country born, city raised, man. You know, in the ghetto.
Oscar was my third child. He was born November 24th, 1938, in Bellsburg, Tennessee, about 40 miles from Nashville.
Mizelle Bell and Bailey Robertson grew up on neighboring farms in Dixon County, Tennessee. They married in 1934. She was 17, he 22. Their marriage produced 3 sons, Bailey, Henry, and the youngest, Oscar.
My father died when I was 12 years old, and I've been making my living for myself ever since I was 12.
The book, An American Dilemma, published in 1944, revealed Southern states were spending twice as much to educate white children and 4 times as much on white school facilities. In Tennessee, black children were not provided school transportation and could attend school only through the 8th grade.
I wanted to get them to where they could go to college, do whatever they wanted to do. So I had to leave from down there.
I thought they could get education elsewhere, so I just decided to bring them to Indianapolis. We had a Foot Locker, put everything we had in it and got on the back of the bus.
Providing their children a higher standard of education seemed logical, but was accompanied with severe problems of urban blight.
The war was going on, and you couldn't find a house anywhere in any city. And I had to take one in the slum areas.
Oh, I had a little old 3-room shotgun house.
You can see straight through it. Yeah, all the room, everything is straight. That's why it's called a shotgun. When you look through the front, you see all the way through the house. Initially, we had an outside john, but I guess those years, I guess everyone had outside johns at one time.
Every summer, they had this septic truck that came down the back way and to clean those things out, and it was awful. The entire neighborhood was lit up.
The Robertsons' new address, 1005 Colton Street.
Colton Street was about 2-3 blocks long. That street had some of everything on it. It had gambling, shooting, fighting, killing. It was not an environment that you would want to raise your children in.
All I had to say to my boys, look, don't touch, and don't do.
Mom would always remind us to be careful whenever anything was going on out there, and sometimes it was during the day. We would just sort of go in the house and just seek cover until it cleared, and then we'd go back out. In today's definitions, we were living in a ghetto.
Shooting dope and shooting dice and cussing and going on, the best place for them was with my father.
Early Bell owned the Bellsburg, Tennessee farm where he, his daughter, and 3 grandsons were born. Each summer, the Robertson brothers left the inner city and made the 300-mile, 8-hour trip to the Tennessee farm. It could be a precarious trip for blacks of the 1940s.
We would go to the bus station. There were little sections for colored and white.
I didn't even know the reason I was actually sitting on the back of the bus. Other than my mother and father told me this, I had to sit on the back of the bus. I didn't know they had laws that said blacks couldn't ride in the front of the bus.
When you'd get off the bus at a rest stop, they had a separate little restaurant area for blacks to go to. And then when you went to the bathroom, you went around to the back.
When the Robertson brothers arrived on the Tennessee farm, a different type of education ensued.
When the rooster crowed, you were coming out of bed. You feed the animals, and then you eat yourself. You ate a hearty breakfast.
We were prepared to go with my grandfather down to what we call the bottoms, which is where we did a lot of work down there with him. The travel then was by horse and wagon. By the time we had the horses harnessed up and we start with the wagon, it takes about an hour to 45 minutes to get there, and an hour to 45 minutes to get back.
You worked until noon, then you ate a sandwich, and you came back and worked again until dark, and you came home.
As for leisure time, it was sparse and anti-high-tech.
We would sit on the porch and talk to our grandfather.
He read the Bible every night and sang religious songs.
He would always interpret what we couldn't understand.
He knew verses all over the Bible, which I still don't know the Bible. I mean, not like he did. That's all he ever knew. He knew hard work and God. And I always said that a farmer loves Sunday and rain. So only 2 days he's off.
Growing up around our grandparents and our mother and father, we got a pretty good basic value system of right and wrong. We'd get back a few days or maybe a week or so before school started, and we'd enroll in school, and that would be it.
I met Oscar in 7th grade.
They say you shouldn't try to pick your children's company. I picked mine. He was such a nice young man, and I liked him.
As a matter of fact, I didn't even know Oscar could play ball. We met academically, and I always respected him for his studiousness and his astuteness and his intelligence, because he was quite a mathematician. The biggest surprise I ever had when we got into the 8th grade, I never even paid attention to basketball or cared that much about it. And I went to our 8th grade, the first 8th grade game they had. I forget who the opponent was, but he was sensational. I could not believe that. I said, "You never told me you could do this." "You do what?" That's his attitude.
I started with Tom Sleep when I was in the 7th grade, and we won a 7th and 8th grade championship. We were in a Quonset hut gym, so you didn't get to shoot a lot of long jump shots, so everything was going to the basket. And you just worked on little fundamental things.
Tom taught them to be on time, to be obedient, to play fair ball, and also respect their leaders.
He would sit you down and talk to you about the girls, which my father didn't do that. But he told you, the things you could do and things you couldn't, treat women with respect.
We had no girls. We had nothing to do but study, and he played ball.
Freshmen, you're scared of girls anyway, man. You don't know you think they're going to attack you, man. I mean, first of all, you don't know what to say.
A lot of parties or things like that, I don't think he did all that. He might have done some of it, but not a whole lot of it. But see, some of them wanted to burn the candles at both ends, and you can't do that and play ball.
Plus, my father had a rule, had to be in at 10 o'clock during the weekdays.
Oscar was not only becoming aware of social life, but also of Crispus Attucks High School. Brother Bailey, 3 years older, nicknamed Flap, led Crispus Attucks to a dramatic regional win in 1951 over Anderson High School.
In the last 2 or 3 seconds of the game, Bailey threw this shot and it made the score 81-80.
Oscar and I watched that game on TV. And after he shot the ball and it went in, it was bedlam out there. And things did start to change after that. The team started getting better.
Bailey went on to become the all-time leading scorer at Indianapolis Central College. Oscar was 13 when his big brother hit the shot. He found security in basketball, but at home there was a split. His parents divorced.
Mother and father were not getting along, which sort of shocked me to a certain extent. I never saw a lot of things. Saw a few little disagreements, but a lot of family, husband and wives have disagreements. But they didn't get along, so they got a divorce.
Well, not too good. We'll leave it at that.
I would say automatically, it upset the family a little, but they got over it.
I think divorce is difficult on everybody because everybody has to uproot and your life is redirected. There are a lot of changes that you have to be involved in. It's just a different adjustment.
My father lived close by. I used to walk down to his house a lot of times. But, in those days, your father told you to do something, you did it. It's not like it is today. Whenever he told you to do something, you couldn't question it right then. You could come back later and ask him, why'd I have to do that? But not right then. In those days, coming up, I guess that a man's word was the word. And she came out of the country into the city, and she just that didn't go with her anymore. And I think things are destined to be. People say, why do you get a divorce? Sometimes you don't have a choice. It's out of your hands. Like things that happen to you in life. You don't know why they happen. I don't know. I don't even know why I ever played basketball. But things happen to you. This totally is fate. It was predetermined by someone higher than me, and this is where you are. I think everyone here in this earth has a part to play.
Mazelle's part was to sacrifice for her sons by working 3 jobs. She worked in the Black Business District on Indiana Avenue as an all-night cook, during the day as a beautician. In the afternoon, she worked in suburban Indianapolis as a domestic.
I was babysitting for a wealthy woman, and she had 4 bad children, and they gave me a ball, and that was their first ball.
Oscar, you hear your mama calling.
Oscar! Where is that boy?
Go on. Go on home.
Oscar, where have you been?
Outside shooting baskets.
Using one of those rusty old tin cans, huh? I have a surprise for you. Basketball!
Loved the ball. Went out and shot hoops, man. I was in heaven then.
Even in the house before he went to sleep, lying in the bed, he was dribbling.
I used to take tennis balls and rag balls and things and throw them in trees. So then when I got the ball, I was able to go in the park and actually really put the ball in the basket.
Something he would do often as he rose to stardom at Crispus Attucks High School. The 1950s, a time of jukeboxes, malt shops, and explosive social change. Racial segregation under protest and judicial review.
Everybody's angry, particularly the power structure. The system is being destroyed. The value system, segregation, discrimination, is being destroyed.
As long as you were entertaining people, that was fine. You could go out and play baseball or do whatever you want to do. As long as you hit a home run, you might have 50,000 people, black and white, up in the stands cheering for you. But after that was over, then the pressure would start that you couldn't go to certain restaurants to eat, or you couldn't go to a water fountain to drink a glass or get a cup of water,
The Supreme Court ruled separate as unequal, but in the case of Crispus Attucks High School, students felt separate was superior.
It was an advantage. You see, in 1922, the KKK started a petition to have a segregated school where all blacks would go. In September of 1927, the doors of Crispus Attucks opened. Crispus Attucks staff had more PhDs and MAs on staff than any other school in the state. So we had the best as far as educators were concerned.
We lived in an idyllic time in America, no matter what the racial problems or whatever, because we really didn't experience a lot of them because we were all segregated in our community. But to us, it was just a magical time.
It was like a tremendous, wonderful social event where teachers really cared about you, where you had respect for teachers. They were there trying to get you an education, and not the basketball per se. We were told during those days, through education, you're able to get out of this situation you're in and go further into the world.
By by his sophomore year, Oscar had moved into the Tigers' starting lineup.
I grew one year, from my freshman year to my sophomore year, maybe 6 or 7 inches.
Other than having talent, he had it up here, smarts.
Mr. Crow had it made. He had a coach out there on the floor as well as himself. Because really the guys looked up to Oscar as though he was the coach, because he was just that type of leader. And whenever Oscar had the ball in his hands, well, we just knew nothing could go wrong.
Crispus Attucks moved into the quarterfinals Oscar's sophomore year, where it lost to eventual state champion Milan. Bobby Plump hit the 1954 state championship winner at the buzzer, which 30 years later brought Hollywood to Indiana.
They only lost one game in the next 2 years, so I think we were very fortunate to catch them at the time that we did.
He was tough then. Oscar was like a rubber band. He could stretch and reach farther than anybody I've ever seen in my life, and he got nothing but better after that. To me, he is the best that I have seen in Indiana high school basketball.
When the basketball season ended, Oscar was a member of the track team, an all-city high jumper.
He got to the state finals his senior year, and that was one year that he was the only member of the track team that made it to the state.
But basketball was primary and his sport of all seasons.
Down there near where he lived, they had a little court, you know, and he'd be down there, and everybody'd be going to bed, and he'd be out there practicing. That's what they call the Dust Bowl.
The Dust Bowl, nicknamed for dust flying around the edges, was a court located at the government housing projects called Lockfield Gardens. It was about a block from Colton Street.
When you say Lockfield Gardens, you think of something majestic with flowers and you know, and shade and whatnot, but it was hot, asphalt, and a combination of asphalt and concrete on the surface. One vertical pole that held the basket. A lot of competition.
For the Rucker tournament in New York, our Dust Bowl was equivalent to that, because all the great stars from Indianapolis, high school, college, etc., would gather at the Dust Bowl. Teams would come in from Chicago, Detroit, Ohio.
The real growth of basketball came when we started to play where Bruiser Gaines was in charge, because some of those guys were some pretty nasty individuals, and you know, he had to control them. Not a lot of fights, or you know, only a couple of gun incidents. You get by those things too, so you know, you got to get out there in the parks and play with kids and try things and do things, you know, make mistakes, and miss baskets, you know, get pushed back and forth until you learn yourself. That's the only way you're going to learn to play.
Youngsters developed as basketball players by their play on the playgrounds, but it had to be refined, and some of it had to be removed once they got into team play.
The unrestrained style of Dust Bowl gave way to Crispus Attucks, where there was more structure and more opportunity. For instance, to become the first high school from Indianapolis to win an Indiana State basketball title. But Attucks would have to win without a home court. Attucks had been built with an on-site gym, but it was barely big enough to practice in.
It would seat about 500 students, bleachers on one side only.
It was reflective of social mores of the time. It was a black school. It wasn't treated very well, and that's obviously not something Indiana could be very proud of.
We started playing at the Butler Fieldhouse. Every school in the state wanted to play Attucks. Most of the time, the attendance was over 10,000.
We got the biggest crowd, and I'm sure the school made the most money. So it worked out to our advantage.
And so Attucks played all its games on the road, but always with a passionate following. The animated Crispus Attucks fans, in honor of their team's stunning record, devised a proclamation of victory.
There was no certain score where the song began, but everybody knew when it began, the game was over. Oh, Tech is rough and Tech is tough. They can beat everybody, but they can't beat us. Hotty, 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 hotty. Hotty, 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 ho. Oh, skip, bop, beat 'em. That's the crazy song. That's the crazy song. Yeah!
As flamboyant as the Attucks crowd was, Oscar was the opposite.
He was never flashy.
He was sort of introverted.
He was steady, reliable.
Photographers and the news media, they were breaking down the doors to get to him and all that stuff, you know, all the way through school, and he just hated it.
He was quiet. He observed a lot. Didn't have a lot to say.
You could depend on him.
He would get his mind set to accomplish something and work at that.
The Tigers' only regular season loss Oscar's junior year was at Connorsville. But in the city championship, Attucks had a double overtime game versus Shortridge.
Oscar jumped center on the last center jump.
In 1955, the second overtime was sudden death. First team to score wins.
He got the ball out that thing, Bill Brown. He got it back to Oscar. He raised up, hit a big jump, and that was it.
There was an even tighter tournament moment. Oscar made the winning play again, this time from defense. An interception with seconds left to stop Muncie Central's potential winning play. Attucks won the regional 71-70, advanced to the state championship weekend, where the semi and the final are played on the same day. When Attucks won in the afternoon and advanced to the evening title game versus segregated Gary Roosevelt, it was the first all-black final in Indiana history.
Usually you get to go over to Butler University and you stay in the dorms until the games, you walk over and play. They didn't let either one of our teams stay at Butler University. But they went against that tradition, us because we were all black. We would tank their university by staying in these dormitories.
Attucks rested between games at a downtown hotel, Roosevelt with black families in the area. Still, that night's final was paramount. Attucks was focused on becoming Indy's first state basketball champion of any color.
Oscar Robertson from the corner. Terrific. Attucks had one less shot, but a better percentage. Robertson is scoring.
Attucks led all the way, led by 19 at the half. There never was any question about which team was going to win.
Mitchell picked for him nicely, and Robertson got it. There goes Robertson around. In there. Pick up their scoring pace. All the way under, he got it. Robertson.
Going into that game, the highest point total ever in a state championship game was 68. Roosevelt beat that by 6, and it was never in the game.
Hampton firing and running. Robertson. He'll fire from the corner. Could be in there. That's 30 points for him.
His 30-point game wasn't anything special. It was just Oscar. I mean, that was the way he played.
There's Ford firing. And it's all over. Indianapolis wins their first state basketball championship.
We felt that it belonged to the Christmas Attucks fans, the blacks of Christmas Attucks.
The Attucks team was a vanguard for all the blacks in the city, in fact, the state, to look up to. We came from the field house, rushed around the circle, and then on out to Northwestern Park. Now that I'm an adult and I know that this wasn't necessarily the way other teams had celebrated, I felt like they did us a disservice.
Several schools had won back-to-back titles, but Indiana had never crowned an undefeated champion. The analysts of the day did not predict a repeat, let alone Attucks' perfection.
Entering that season, I think people thought Attucks was more vulnerable because they'd lost 4 of the 5 starters. They did keep the best one.
The 1956 team scored over 80 points 9 times. In February, a staggering 123 points versus the state's 10th-ranked team. Unlike the prior year, there wasn't a loss, not even a close call.
Competitiveness that we experienced was more with us, within the team. If you made a mistake, somebody was going to come in there and you might not get back in.
Oscar averaged 25 points per game and set a state record when he scored 62 versus Sacred Heart.
They had to almost force me to do this because I didn't really want to do it. It really didn't matter to me whether I had broke that record or not. I just wanted to win.
The defending champion Tigers took a 2-season, 44-game winning streak and a 30-win, 0-loss record into the 1956 title game.
Crowd that turned out for the state finals of 1956. So now we're all set to play ball for your Admiral Dealer once again, and over WISH, Wish in Indianapolis, Luke Walton.
The opponent, a deliberate team, Lafayette Jefferson.
They didn't believe in the fast break. They believed in passing the ball and control type and working for their shots.
The big O, Oscar Robertson. He's the only player I ever saw in the finals that played all three positions, center, forward, and guard, and played them like a star.
Walking to the batting line, shakes his head and hands it over to Brown. They have three men out. Oscar takes it while Brown gets down in there. Oscar goes down the right-hand side, lays it up there and in there, unmolested. Patton holding the ball high above his head, dribbles around the right side of the free throw circle, sends it to the right of the basket over to Oscar Robertson, who puts it up there and in there. A blind pivot shot by Oscar Robertson. Down the floor to Oscar, he drives into the free throw circle, drives in under the basket, puts the ball up there and in there. Oscar had to be a houdini to get that shot underway.
Oscar scored a tournament record 39 points. There would be no movie, but Crispus Attucks had secured a hallowed position in Indiana high school basketball history.
The greatest team I ever saw was the 1956 Attucks team. They went unbeaten. They were the first team ever to go unbeaten.
That was always considered something of a jinx. If you came into the tournament undefeated, you weren't going to win it probably, because something would come up.
And during the course of the season and the tournament, they beat 7 out of the top 10 teams in the state. I don't think that's ever happened before, and it very likely will never happen again.
We looked at it like this was us against the world, and we conquered everybody.
It allowed basketball to do in Indiana what Jackie Robinson and baseball had done for the rest of the country not quite 10 years earlier.
Integrated all over the schools fully, because those coaches that we played against were tired of us beating them all the time. So they wanted some of those athletes who were coming to Attucks to go to their schools.
Yet there was one covert snub which showed while the barriers were falling, many were still in place.
The champion got to ride on the fire trucks downtown on the circle, which was the center of town, and this is where you partied until you went home, but not Crispus Attucks. They said if we went downtown, we would tear up the town.
But Indiana could boast of colorblindness when it came to Oscar's basketball ability. He would wear jersey number 1 in the Indiana-Kentucky All-Star game, voted Indiana Player of the Year.
I wasn't that elated by being Mr. Basketball. I was more elated about playing in the game, but I was happy to be Mr. Basketball.
There were 2 All-Star games. Oscar scored 34 in the first, 41 in the second. A former Indiana high school player and young college coach was in the stands for both, recruiting for his UCLA team.
Of all the high school players I've ever seen, I thought Oscar was one that could move, as a senior, move right into the pro ranks and become a star. He was so much better than all of the great players in high school with whom he was associated in an all-star game. He was unselfish, he had power, he was quick, he could hit from outside, he could handle the ball, he had great vision, could pass the ball, and defensively he was very good, which is often overlooked. All the other players were good, but he was so much better, there just was hardly any comparison. He just stood out so much, I thought he could immediately have been a star in the pros.
I wanted to go to college, because I was taught that from my parents who didn't have a real formal education, that education was the way out of a bad situation.
At Crispus Attucks, he had been an excellent student, National Honor Society, 16th in a class of 171.
Ray Crow had a rule that if you don't study and get your marks, you don't play basketball. But, my father, he pushed that too, especially when my oldest brother, Bailey, who has since passed away, he really got on him a lot about studying and whatnot. And, so I got the message.
He graduated and got his diploma for graduating. That meant more to me, and all this excitement that was carrying on in town, but I knew it wasn't going to last forever anyway, so.
As Coach Wooden had summarized, the high school All-American with a sparkling grade point had plenty of college opportunities.
From California to New York, every state.
I had big ideas. I was coaching a small junior college in California called Hancock College. Of course, every major university in the world wanted Oscar, but I felt, well, this would be a good place for him too.
I wrote him a recruiting letter. I never did see him play in high school, but reputation was enough to suit me.
Initially, Oscar was considering only one university.
Oscar had planned to go to Indiana, and he went to meet with Branch McCracken, who was the coach then. And the first thing Branch said to him was, I hope you're not one of those guys who wants to be paid money to play basketball. And he was so offended by the interview, he just turned around with his high school coach, Ray Crow, and said, I got to find someplace else to go.
He picked Cincinnati because he liked the guy that was representing Cincinnati.
And Walter Paul really did the job. He sent them the Enquirer, every paper, and he just had a connection with Oscar.
Walter Paul was a very good man, I think. He just threw his arms around Oscar and helped him in many ways, you know, talking to him.
Proximity was a factor. He wanted to stay near Indianapolis.
He was a homeboy.
Oscar wanted to major in business. UC offered a unique program.
It was a co-op program where you worked, you would work 6 months and go to school 6 months. And he wanted to work. He wanted to make some money.
Finally, there was the basketball program itself, which played national spotlight games at the mecca of 1950s college basketball.
New York has a way of telling whether you're going to be a star or not. There have been several great athletes to go into New York and did zero. When you came into New York as an All-American, they wanted you to play like one. You know, they didn't want you to stumble or do anything at all. If you stumbled, man, they would never forgive you.
Oscar Robertson was the 5th African-American basketball player at UC. And the university did not have a heritage at all of being welcoming to African-American athletes, even though they had one as early as 1911 in track. When Robertson got there and brought it the national attention and the national respect it didn't have before, and not only among the media, but among African-American high school basketball players, it meant that they were looking to him for leadership, and he provided that. He provided them with a sense that they could go to a place like UC and succeed.
I'd come over to see Jackie Robinson play a lot of baseball games from Indianapolis with some friends of mine, the Browns. I thought that there were a lot of blacks going to UC.
UC wasn't a friendly place for African Americans. Historically, African American enrollment at UC has always hovered around 10%. So he didn't see a lot of black faces around there.
I don't know if it made a difference or not, but I wish someone from the black community would have told me, hey, Oscar, there are no blacks going to school here. Everyone I met, and a very good dear friend of mine who passed away, Ted Berry, was so nice to me, to be honest. It was unbelievable. Art Hall, Austin Tillotson, they were just really nice to me, but they didn't tell me the situation at Cincinnati.
I just didn't feel good about the city, didn't feel good about the university. But after Oscar enrolled, my wife and I decided, well, he didn't know about this situation, so we were going to try to make it as pleasant for him as we possibly could.
The attitude and atmosphere in Cincinnati was not too dissimilar from the Deep South.
I can recall having problems in Cincinnati myself.
There was restaurants that you couldn't eat in.
There were many times when we went down the dining room that there was nobody in the dining room. You would have thought that the dining room was filled because they were slow waiting on you. They wouldn't wait on you, so they were sending a message that we don't want you here.
There was parks that you couldn't go, Corner Island, for instance.
But attitudes were tolerant and narrow minds widened when it came to Oscar's talent. Coloring UC a national power was the priority.
There was so much hullabaloo, and we heard so much about Oscar, it was like wild anticipation.
George Smith asked me to go up to the Y on Calhoun Street and work this youngster out, and then come back and tell him what I thought, which I did, which I came back and said, he's going to be a great player.
Jack Twyman, who was a national figure in college basketball, a wonderful player, and with him setting the stage for Oscar, by the time Oscar got there, UC was in the big time. They had just not had the national success.
Oscar's recruiting class was among the highest regarded in UC history. In all, 5 incoming freshmen had been all-state in high school.
Ralph Davis was there, and Ron Dykes was there, and Spud Hornsby, and Larry Willie. They had a tremendous basketball team.
Those guys could play basketball, and you put a leader out there like Oscar, and if everybody gelled together, which thank God we all did, there was no egos on that team. Everybody knew that Oscar was the best.
In the 50s, freshmen were ineligible for varsity competition. The freshman team played their game as the prelim to the varsity game.
There'd be thousands of people lined up outside the old field house to get in to watch the freshman games.
They were definitely the best team on the campus. We're not going to argue that. I mean, we scrimmaged, and it was very simply that his club beat what was then the varsity. Pretty good varsity club, too.
Eligible as a sophomore, UC fans knew from the outset what the rest of the nation would discover: his 11th varsity game, January 9th, 1958, versus Seton Hall.
I've heard so many people tell me they were at that game. There were only like 4,000 or 5,000 people there in the old garden in New York.
I think this was the first time the big city was going to get a look at the Big O.
We've been hearing a lot about this player. And, you know, we were all in New York, being New Yorkers and being big basketball people ourselves. We were wondering how good he was. And off that night alone, that was it. You know, you realized how great he really was.
The New York basketball media and people got an eye for that day. He put on a show that they had never seen before.
Oscar was unbelievable. He scored more than the opposition.
It was that solidified his reputation, I think, as the best college player in America.
The team spent the night in New York. Chuck Maychuk was Oscar's roommate.
And you were getting dressed when the game was over, and Oscar again over in the corner, and there was press all around him, and it was so much, he said, "Chuck, wait for me, let's walk back." The bus had gone. I said, fine. So we walked outside, and there was a light snow, and we walked along for 12 blocks just talking about the game, nothing in particular. He gets back, watches a little TV, he's sleeping. And I say, what youngster today, having scored 56 points in Madison Square Garden, is going to go home, watch the TV of sports, and then go to bed? Not too many.
While the New York City performance propelled him to national fame, the colorful nickname came from the local radio voice of the Bearcats.
Dick Baker gave me the name, the Big O. Elgin was called the Rabbit, Wood was called the Stilt, and he named me the Big O.
Oh, does it again. Oh, does it again.
Rebound, passes off to Big O. Big O pushes one up from 35 out. It's good.
The Big O does it again.
Willie to Oscar underneath. Robertson lays it up and in. 22 points for Big O.
Even among today's most passionate analysts, the moniker endures.
Awesome, baby, with a capital O. The Big O. Love him. Pound for pound, inch for inch, and collegiate, he was just the best.
Awesome indeed. Midway through his sophomore year, Oscar was in a tight race for the NCAA scoring title with Wilt Chamberlain and Seattle's Elgin Baylor. One night, Chamberlain received an urgent call at his Kansas dorm from Baylor.
And Elgin says to me, who is this guy, the Big O? He's averaging like 32 points a game. I never heard of him. I said, the Big O is probably the greatest basketball player that ever lived. I said, the only way you're going to ever win that scoring title is if he decides not to shoot the ball at all. Never shoots the ball anyway, he always gets it to somebody else. So he's averaging 32 points without shooting the ball. If he decides to shoot the ball, it's going to be 50 or 60 points and lights out for you and me. And he said, oh, well, thanks, Will, thanks. And he hung up.
Oscar became the first sophomore ever to lead the country in scoring, and with 15 rebounds per game, the first sophomore to be named Player of the Year. He led the Missouri Valley champion Bearcats into the NCAA regional final versus Kansas State.
And I think the entire nation was looking forward to having Cincinnati in the Final Four.
To this day, I think it's the best team that the University of Cincinnati's ever had.
But Kansas State felt it had the equal of Oscar in All-American Bob Boozer.
You take Boozer, who was an unbelievable competitor, and Oscar, he's just as competitive as it gets. So those two guys went at it.
It was a tense, tight game. Oscar and Boozer dominated the action. With 1 second left, the key play of the game occurred, but the film of the final minutes is missing. Oscar was fouled. He hit the first to tie the game. The debate concerns the second free throw.
He had to make the second one to win the game. And he's at the line, and he's taking his normal procedures before he shoots a free throw. And official is off to the left.
And all of a sudden, this official starts putting a count on Oscar.
Wayne Stevens is under the basket. He's on the line, under the boards. And Oscar's in the middle of a dribble and Wayne says, shoot, Oscar.
So he shot it right away without taking time to line it up and everything else. As a result, he missed it.
They did count, and I'll tell you why, because I hit the first free throw and I turned around to tell the guy, don't foul. And I don't know, someone says, yeah, he's counting, so I turned around and shot too quick and missed the shot.
We got the rebound, of course, went in overtime, and we beat them in overtime.
I have never seen that called since. Didn't see it called before that.
That was one of the most devastating losses in sports that I've ever been associated with.
The road to a national title was only one of the difficult paths Oscar would travel during his career.
He was pelted with hot dogs on the court. He was pelted continually with racial slurs whenever they went anywhere in the South.
We played the University of Houston. There was a new hotel, the Shamrock Hilton Hotel. They wouldn't let Oscar check in. There was a black school there, and he stayed on campus there. That hurt us probably more than anything as a team. We won the game. We did beat Houston, but as I look back on it now, I would have gone with Oscar and stayed there.
If you go to play in North Texas, Denton, Texas, go in the locker room, there's a black cat. Well, now where I'm from, in Indianapolis, a cat means you got rats. And that cat's killing these rats, man, keep them off of you. That's the truth. So I go in the locker room, and I see this black cat, I said, man, they must have rats in here. Then the guys got quiet. I said, what's the matter with you guys? Because usually, the guys bubbly, Ralph Davis and Dykes and Willie. What's wrong with you guys? Then I realized, they put the cat in for me.
I know it hurt him. I could see that things like that hurt him. And I'm sure if I could see it, everyone else could.
In December of his junior year, the 5-0 Bearcats traveled to Raleigh, North Carolina for the Dixie Classic. Oscar and his roommate John Bryant were not allowed at a hotel. This time, the UC team stayed together at an on-campus fraternity. But the KKK sent a death threat, and racial taunts were rampant.
I was sitting on the bench, and there was a guy in a military uniform who stood up and said, "You black son of a bitch, whoever said you were an All-American, you couldn't make the Little Sisters of the Poor teams." It was that kind of language that was coming from all over the place.
He had to put up with a lot of crap, not only from other teams, but from people at UC. They sort of made him a showcase for the university and the athletic department, but a lot of it was just a public facade. Privately, Robertson suffered a lot of racism at the university and wherever he went to play.
Walking, walking, walking a lonely road. Sometimes high and sometimes low. Walking a lonely road. Sometimes fast and sometimes slow. Walking a lonely road. Walking. Sometimes I don't want to go. Walking a lonely road. I know that I'm not alone. Walking a lonely road. Sisters and brothers, here we go. Walking a lonely road. But we're gonna keep walking, 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 walking a lonely road. Walking a lonely road. Walking a lonely road.
The Bearcats lost 2 out of 3 in Raleigh, but Oscar acquired a quiet, furious focus.
Makes you more determined.
He came home that weekend, and he was a little disturbed, and I said to him, "You can be to basketball what Jackie Robertson was to baseball, if you so desire."
I knew what Jack had gone through because I read books about Jackie Robinson and whatnot. I knew all the things that they did to him. What Jackie went through, no one could endure. It killed him.
There are times when quietness shows more strength than loudness.
There's hardly ever a right time, many times when things occur, to act out the way you really want to act out, because it's just not feasible, it's not safe.
Even though things don't happen to you in life that you don't like, you know, you get to pick your moments.
We were conflicted, if you will, sometimes, because we knew we were getting special treatment as members of the University of Cincinnati basketball team that would not be afforded to us if we were to walk in on our own cart. On the other hand, we felt that we were probably making some contribution to the changes that were taking place in the American society.
Following the Dixie Classic, the Bearcats won 16 straight. UC was back in the NCAA Regional Final, a rematch with Kansas State and Boozer.
The Bearcats are underdogs in this ball game. They've got to have a great game tonight.
Before we went down to the pregame meal and everything, Oscar looked at me and said, if the rest of the guys will just play a little bit, we're going to beat these guys tonight.
Probably didn't say that, but it sounds good anyway.
Ralph Davis to the wall in the forecourt. Whips it off to Robertson on the left side of the lane. Bounce pass underneath the rebound. He lays it up and in. Up to Robertson on the left side. By the free throw line. He jumps and shoots, and it's good. Robertson has it all on the forecourt. He's on the left side. A one-hand jump shot from 15 feet out. He hits.
It was another one of those unbelievable games where he was hitting jump shots from the corner, rebounding.
Midway through the first half, Boozer missed a shot, and Oscar grabbed the most renowned rebound of his career.
And getting the ball again is Boozer. He jumps and shoots from the free throw line. This time it's no good, and Robertson clears the board.
And he kicked his legs out, and of course we looked at his Chuck Taylor All-Stars. I remember almost getting kicked in the face, and of course recoiled backward to get out of his kick area.
I was a lot limber then, you know, flexible, which it would take an operation to get me to do that now.
As for the game, Oscar had 17 rebounds, 24 points.
The Bearcats with a three-point lead. They might just take it easy here. 3:28 left to go in the ball game. Ralph bounce pass Robertson on a high post. Jumps up from the free throw line. It's good! A beautiful shot! The first shot up by Oscar. It's good. And the Bearcats, they jump. Landry jump. The Bearcats win by 10 points. And look at those Bearcats out on the floor. The fans racing out there from Cincinnati. They're picking up Oscar Robertson. He's played a tremendous game. He scored tonight 24 points. He's been the playmaker supreme in the second half. Oscar's being mobbed. I just hope that he doesn't get hurt. Oscar getting lifted up onto the fans out there, and the fans here in the auditorium giving him a big hand.
Welcome to the 1959 NCAA Basketball Championship Final Four. The University of Cincinnati taking on the University of California Golden Bears. And the winner goes to the championship game. Oscar gets the rebound, comes down the floor, across the 10-second line in the forecourt, passes off to Whitaker. Whitaker lays it up, it's good. Brings it down the floor, crosses in the forecourt, comes down the right side of the floor, 10-foot jumper, it's good.
We were a defensive team. We didn't turn the ball over. I think that year in the regional, we only had one turnover in 2 games in the regional.
Pete Newell he was a master tactician. He knew exactly what all of us did. He knew Oscar's strengths. He knew every player's moves, where they like to shoot from.
Oscar gets the rebound, coming down the floor in a fast break, finds Ralph Davis. Davis goes in to the left. It's good.
The idea was to make Oscar give up the ball and not allow him to be in the position to be the second or third choice to get it back.
When I was double teamed, I was taught to get the ball to the open man. And if you don't make the shots, you don't win.
Darrell Imhoff had the career game that he's ever had.
After defeating UC, California beat West Virginia to win the 1959 national championship. A Final Four loss and the culture shock of overt racism were tempered by another national scoring title, his second Player of the Year award, and Oscar had met Yvonne Crittenden.
Something I think that was taking place in French Hall, which was the dormitory there, and I think she caught his eye and all that, and not that Oscar saw her, and so that's sort of how I got started, I think.
I hate to change this story to really tell the truth, and now maybe I should leave it like that because that sounds really great. So, I mean, no, actually, how I met Yvonne was through a friend of mine.
Yvonne was teaching school in the same building that my wife Gladys was, and she introduced Oscar to Yvonne.
And named Gladys Tillotson, who was teaching with her, and I don't know what school it was.
Washington Park grade school downtown.
Austin, Tillotson said, you know, he said, I know a young lady that you would love to meet. I said, how do you know that, Austin? He said, well, she's very nice, she's this and that. He said, so he gave me a number and I called her.
Well, he called me for 2 straight weeks every night. And finally he asked for a date. And the date was to a function at the University of Cincinnati. It was a big concert.
I know about girls and how they take forever getting dressed for their dates and all that. But Oscar paid particular attention to, you know, should I wear this? Should I wear that? Do you think this might be all right?
John is old and feeble. You know, he doesn't get his story straight.
Again, I said it's kind of interesting because Yvonne was a very attractive, popular, polished young lady. Oscar said, I want to date her.
So he came and got me, and we double dated with John Bryant and his friend, and he spent the whole time talking to John Bryant. He was kind of shy then.
Oscar was nervous. Oscar was probably more nervous than in any basketball game that he had played to that point.
You had to get your courage up, you know. You didn't want to say the wrong thing, you know. You didn't know what a lot of women like sports, you know. I mean, what else was there to talk about? Then, but as life goes on, you find out, you know, you're more worldly, you know. I mean, I didn't know a whole lot then. All I knew was going to class and playing basketball.
I felt good about it, especially the way they turned out. They made a fine couple.
Oscar's personal life was flourishing, and in 2 years he had led UC to national power status, playing to sold-out crowds at 3-year-old Armory Fieldhouse.
It was a very good floor indeed. You know, it wasn't a huge arena, only seated about 8,000 or 9,000 people. That was a tough ticket also.
Well, the old Armory Fieldhouse, you were right next to the court. I mean, it was really a good place to watch a basketball game. And they were all sold out.
They were very exciting. I mean, even now people tell you that they went to every game and that was a really important part of their life. And even children, you know, they were children then. They'll say, my father used to take me to the games and I saw all of Oscar's games.
The excitement was transmitted to area playgrounds where youngsters were fixated on playing Big O ball.
None of us could dribble with our left hand, you know, so that sort of, you know, complicated I guess the beauty of this. You know, we didn't have that crossover down.
I was never the Big O because I couldn't shoot free throws the way he did. He had this unique, nobody's ever shot free throws the way he did.
Big O, and we'd all fall back and try that fadeaway jump shot, and it was a thing of beauty. It never went in, clang.
People wanted to be the Big O. They wanted to be a guy who would do everything. You know, that's what you'd say, who are you trying to be, the Big O? But I couldn't be the Big O because I wasn't built that way, and I couldn't jump that way, and I couldn't shoot my free throws. I still don't know how he did it.
Oscar's senior year, the Bearcats opened with 10 wins, averaging 98 points per game. Oscar also made his final collegiate appearance in New York City, the Holiday Festival final versus Iowa, and its sophomore star, Don Nelson.
The Bearcats being introduced now, and a big hand for the Big O.
UC was sluggish through the first 10 minutes and trailed by 11 points.
George Smith had called this timeout, and he tells his players what he wants them to do. Get the ball to Oscar and get the hell out of his way.
Oscar finished with 50 points as UC won 96-83. The Bearcats won 13 straight before losing to Bradley by a point, then started a new win streak. The new streak included a February 1st win over Drake at Armory.
Ladies and gentlemen, Oscar Robertson has now scored 2,539 points in his varsity career. This is the greatest three-year total ever to be scored in major college competition. At the beginning of the halftime, there will be a brief presentation.
It couldn't be presented to a more deserving All-American and great star of the game of basketball. The University of Cincinnati is very proud that Oscar Robertson is a student as well as a basketball player. And Oscar, at this time, it gives me great pleasure to present this ball to the greatest basketball player in the world.
UC was also number one, winning 14 straight on the way to its second consecutive Final Four.
Here we are at the Cow Palace in San Francisco, California. A rematch from 1 year ago, Cincinnati against California.
Oscar was the player of the year 3 straight years, the leading scorer, and had all kind of statistical numbers, and that was probably the best opportunity that they had to win the whole thing.
We wanted that game more than any game we played. We wanted to play them again.
Our whole defense was predicated on being able to stop, not to stop him, because you don't stop Oscar, but to try to reduce the amount of damage he can do to you, is a better way to put it. And to do this, you had to play him with 1 player on him and 4 people really helping. And so we did a real good job of rotating, and we tried to make the man that shot the ball not be Oscar by letting somebody else free, doubling Oscar. And he was such a team player. When he was doubled, there's somebody open out there, and he's going to find him.
I jumped on him. I said, I'd rather see you taking a 15-foot jump shot than somebody else taking a 2 or 3 foot shot.
Oscar comes into the forecourt, down on the right side, into the corner. 3 men around him. He jumps and shoots over them and scores.
He sort of laughed and he said that if somebody is open, you give them the ball. And that's just the way the game should be played.
But we were gambling that that person that he did find was not going to hurt us as much as Oscar shooting the ball.
When I've talked about the Kansas State loss, the 2 losses to California were devastating. Just absolutely, because we were there. We were there to win it, and it didn't happen.
Hogue gained some experience, and so did Bob Wiesenhahn, Carl Bolden. They went on to win in '61.
His college career over, the retrospection had begun.
My Century team, I would line up with Oscar Robertson and Jerry West in the backcourt. Lou Alcindor would be my center. David Thompson would be my small forward. Larry Bird would be my big forward. And then I'd go Super 7, my 2 guys off the bench, Pistol Pete Maravich and Jerry Lucas.
There had been few black stars before the mid-50s. Elgin Baylor, Oscar Robertson, Wilt Chamberlain were really pioneers in that sense, and they, along with Bill Russell also, and they brought the black athlete to prominence in the professional game. So he was very visible as a pioneer representing his race.
You don't forget things that happen to you. You might put them aside, but you don't forget things that happen to you. You know, when you grow up in life, some things that happen to you when you're very, very young, you never forget those things at all. Or when you on a job, in a job situation, and you treat it a certain way, you never forget those things at all. And why should I forget? Why should people want me to forget those things? I store them in a bank in the back of my head, never forget. I'm never going to forget those things as long as I live.
The memory of Oscar was long, and it was influential. His now retired number 12 would continue piling up assists.
He influenced a lot of guys, not only myself, other guys that come to UC. Cadre of so many talent that come to UC.
I just decided, since my hero had put it on the map, and then I would attend the University of Cincinnati.
In recruiting, the impact that Oscar had on the program is immeasurable because, people would come there just because Oscar had played at that particular school.
It made our recruiting a lot easier after he was here. Not only black athletes, but white athletes as well.
If it wasn't for Oscar, they wouldn't have gotten those key players coming later on that would guide them to the championships in 61 and 62.
Oscar, you've had a tremendous career here at the University of Cincinnati. About 10 years from now, what are one or two of the things that you remember most about your past 3 years?
Well, I think the return of my number here that just happened today is definitely a big thrill with me. And winning basketball games is also a big thrill.
I know what you mean. Oscar, what does the immediate future hold for you?
Well, I plan to get married in June, and I hope to make the Olympic team, which I'm going out to Denver tomorrow morning to prepare for.
We got married after Oscar graduated in June 1960. So we got married, and then we went to New York, where I was finishing up school, and he worked, and then we both went to Rome.
The Rome Olympic team featured such rare athletes, Oscar utilized the advice of a boxer who had become known to the world as Muhammad Ali.
He said, angry fighters don't win. I said, what do you mean? I said, you're getting hit. He said, that doesn't matter. He said, you have to remain calm and stay with the game plan. He said, when you get upset, it's when you get beat. And so I just took that into the basketball court.
On the court, Oscar was teamed for the first of many times with his most fierce competitor.
This was rated the best team that was ever assembled for the United States of America. And it has to go down as the best amateur team ever assembled.
And the coach who had schemed to contain him now turned Oscar loose on the world.
I gave him a lot of freedom, which I should as a coach, because I trusted his judgments and his ability to see things out there. I wanted the ball in his hands.
Mr. Newell was kind enough to make Oscar and I co-captains. He was kind of vocal, and I was extremely quiet. But I think that, you develop appreciation for people that you're around, the genius that some people have to play the game, and he had a genius to play the game.
We played, I think, 6 games in the Olympics, and the closest team to us, I think, was Russia.
They were putting a lot of emphasis on that game. I mean, it was a real conflict not between two basketball teams, but between the United States and Russia.
We were in real foul trouble. We had a couple of referees afraid the Cold War was going to end, the real war was going to start, so they didn't want any contact. They got it from 18 down to maybe 10 points at half, 8 points at half. And I said, we're going to play them baseline to baseline. It was the greatest press I've ever seen. I think we outscored them 25-1. And we just boomed right out.
The significant thrill that I'll never forget is when we got to go up there and receive the gold medal for the United States team. I honestly felt my pants shaking. I was that nervous, and it was one of the most touching moments of my life.
Yeah, it was great. It was a good moment, I mean, all the guys were from the same type background, very, very poor, basketball background, good college careers and whatnot, so just coming together to play and win, trying to win a game of basketball for your country. I thought it was a wonderful moment.
To win a gold medal was probably the high point of my career in basketball, because it was only once, the only chance I had, and to share that with Oscar, who would be a future teammate for a number of years, was very rewarding for me.
In the next 2 seasons, Boozer, Smith, and Jay Arnett joined Lucas and Oscar as 5 of the former Olympians played for the Cincinnati Royals. In all, 9 of the gold medal winners went on to the NBA.
Oscar and Jerry had a very tough complementary relationship in the league because they were regarded as 1 and 2 best guards in the league. And whenever we'd play Cincinnati, Oscar and Jerry would go at it again, but always in a good, friendly, hard-played manner.
When I played against him, I used to say, my gosh, this guy's so far ahead of everybody that he makes it look simple. The players that make it look simple and where it doesn't look like they're doing very much are the players who are really good.
West was the #1 pick of the Lakers. Oscar was the #1 of #1s. The last place Royals used the territorial pick to keep him in Cincinnati. Territorial gave an NBA franchise the right to claim a local star to keep his following intact. and paying at their gate.
Anybody who knows anything about the history of the Royals will know that we weren't very good until he came.
With the addition of Oscar, Royals attendance rocketed from 1,400 to 5,200 per game, and the team improved from 19 to 33 wins.
Oscar dissected the game. We had Jack Twyman, and Jack was a great jump shooter. And when Jack got to his spot, he had the ball. Wayne Embry, Oscar and Wayne worked that 2-on-2 to perfection. And he'd take it in and let Wayne get a couple of fields because Wayne would horse the boards. He'd give me a shot. Oscar played the game like he invented it.
When Time magazine featured him as the cover story, he transcended sports, capturing the attention of the much wider-ranging group of people interested in the national news of an emerging pro sport.
In the NBA's 1961 season, no player comes closer to fulfilling that ideal of the complete court man than the Cincinnati Royals' Oscar Robertson.
Time was also reporting on the social movement of African Americans revolutionizing professional sports. Hank Aaron and Willie Mays in baseball, Jimmy Brown in football, Chamberlain, Baylor, Russell, and Robertson in the NBA. Athletes with power who were not lumbering. Players with sheer speed and quickness who had enormous strength. Oscar was a point guard who could score, a scorer who could rebound, and a rebounder who could assist. He brought an exclusive package of skills to the game's primary statistical categories and gave it a brand name.
Triple-double.
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 The 1961-62 NBA season, he averaged a triple-double for the entire season. 61-62 was the only year that for a season he had a triple-double ratio. But if you look at the 5-year period and take his total numbers of rebounds and assists and points scored and divide him by the number of games played, he averaged a triple-double for 5 years. This is just absolutely inconceivable. Nobody has ever come close to doing something like this.
Today in the NBA, if a player has a triple-double, then it's headlines.
Magic myself got triple-doubles every once in a while, but to average them through a full season, that's unbelievable.
Mickey Mantle used to say that if he had known that 40-40 was a significant milestone, 40 home runs and 40 stolen bases, that he would have done it a bunch of times, but he never realized that such a premium would be placed on it later. And I think Oscar Robertson was kind of the same way with the triple-double.
That accomplishment of a triple-double, that stands out just like that.
For those who still respect versatility, however, there seems to be little to debate. Oscar Robertson indeed remains the greatest pure basketball player ever invented.
I didn't fear going into the inside. A lot of guards that I played against in those days, they didn't go to the basket at all.
Oscar was far and away the smartest player I played against. And his attitude was he was going to manipulate the defense.
That's a good observation by Russell, because when we played him, Russell didn't know when to actually double team him or when to back off. Say, Oscar would fool you because he was so adept with the ball.
I just tried to probe and see what the defense was doing and just do just the opposite.
He could dictate to the defense. And so when we had a one-on-one confrontation, the only way I could get him was basically slip up behind him.
If he could fool Russell a little bit, he could fool any man that ever played the game.
Oscar had the strength to create situations. He could control the ball and have one or two guys hanging on him, setting up an open man. And I was very much an opportunist. As soon as I saw my man sneaking over toward Oscar, I ran toward the basket, and here I am, Oscar. And he always figured out a way to get it to you.
He had everybody in his eye and knew what was going on in the court. Had that overall feeling of quarterbacking the team out there in the court, kept the competitive edge.
See, Oscar's attitude offensively was if you would give him a 15-footer, he would take a 10-footer.
If you give Oscar Robertson a 10-foot shot, he's going to look for a 9-foot shot, 8-foot shot until he gets a layup.
He always wanted to take more than was offered.
That's the efficiency that he had, and that's why he was almost a 50% shooter for his career.
Oscar had intelligence, awareness, and patience, which makes him a load.
By being a load, the way Russell probably meant it, you could build a team around Oscar. And they're what they call franchise players.
By Oscar's third season, the Royals franchise was a championship contender from 1962 through 66, averaging 48 wins per season.
Wayne Embry, Happy Harrison, Tom Hawkins, Jerry Lucas, Adrian Smith, and Arlen Buckhorn. He made them a good team, because he forced them to play.
I used to sneak into the Cincinnati Gardens. You could go up a back way, and I didn't have any money, and my parents would always think if they gave me $5 that was enough to tide me over the rest of the week.
It never was as crowded as it should be, only on certain dates. But I mean, you could smell the sweat. You could tell that there were athletes in there ripping and running up and down that floor.
In 1963, the Royals made a serious title run.
And the Royals went to Syracuse on a Sunday afternoon and won. That knocked Syracuse out of it and left it up to the Royals and to the Celts. We didn't go home, we went right to Boston. And 2 days later, the Royals played the Celts and beat them.
Having claimed the home court advantage, the Royals returned from Boston expecting an enthusiastic sellout crowd. But the Cincinnati Gardens had a different crowd in mind.
The circus was in the Garden. The clowns had taken over. There wasn't any place to play. And the resentment of that among the players was just something awful.
Yeah, it was the year the elephant dropped his stuff all over the Cincinnati Garden floor. We had to walk through it. And consequently, because it's too much to drop in, we had to go to the Xavier Fieldhouse and play.
We beat the Celtics twice in Boston and had to come back to Cincinnati and not play on our home court. And we were beaten twice at Schmidt Fieldhouse.
It was an advantage to us, so we took advantage of it, and we beat them there.
We went on to lose in a triple overtime in the 7th game of the Eastern Conference Finals in that year to the Celtics. So that's the closest we came.
The Celtics then beat the Lakers in 6 games to win another NBA title. 1963 symbolized the monopoly that prevented the Royals and the rest of the league from ever winning a championship.
Boston Celtics. As simple as that.
Even though we had a great team in Cincinnati, and unfortunately, I don't think that team probably will ever be recognized as one of the really great teams because we didn't win any championships, but it was one of the better teams that ever played professional basketball. There's no doubt about that.
Because anytime you're going up against Oscar, you got to be prepared. It's not something that you can take for granted that you're going to go into Cincinnati and walk away with a win.
The Boston Celtics team in itself was an interesting team. They would come to Cincinnati and they would come to dinner. I would cook dinner for them. And even Oscar's mother would cook, cook some things for them. And then they would go out into the gardens and they would beat our pants off.
A lot of guys say, well, you shouldn't be friends, and then play against each other. I would play as hard against Oscar as anybody. I think that Wilt and Oscar especially. Because if you didn't play hard, you get embarrassed. He had the other uniform, and he was the enemy.
Oscar took a combat approach to each game, damaging opponents with his array of weapons and driving his team with demanding precision.
Oscar had a way of getting the point across.
Wayne said the first fight he got into the pros, he got into it because of Oscar.
Embry told Bryant he was being illegally held on the pick and roll by the Pistons' Ray Scott, but the ref missed it. There was no foul call, and Scott intercepted the ball twice.
I sort of slaps his foot and hits his hand like that.
That's old slap of the palms of the hand. I remember many times he did that when you did something wrong. You didn't want to hear that slap too much.
And then I said, damn it, Wayne, how long are you going to let Ray Scott continue to mess up our plays?
He'd prod you. When you weren't playing the right D or we weren't getting into a guy with that good defensive intensity. He'd tell you about it in the huddle.
So the very next time, they ran that pick and roll, and Ray reached around and held Wayne, and he said, John, I just had to turn around and cold cock him, because you know what it's like to have ice on you.
The one that really got me was when he would stomp his foot and just kind of give you that look. And boy, you could read those eyes. He didn't have to say anything. He didn't have to say a word. But you knew you better be on it the next time, buddy.
And that stare followed you all the way down the court. You didn't want that.
Oscar was probably the most voracious of all the leaders out there in the game. You know, Russell would get on his guys occasionally, but not much. And he was coaching by 68, 69 in the NBA. Oscar, you know, if someone didn't play up to par on his team, he'd chew him out right there in the court. He'd let him know what was what.
And so he's always talking. Do this, go there. You know you're supposed to do that. Go ahead.
That's what happens in the game. How the guy gets the ball, you got to be ready.
Basically, he kept the guys on their toes.
Oscar was never harsh with us unless we were being lazy. But sometimes he'd get on you when you forgot stuff. But Oscar was pretty patient, especially as we became more successful. I mean, we were the type of people he wanted to put up with because we got the job done, and he appreciated that more than anything.
Well, a lot of people talk, but they don't do anything. They just talk. And he talked and he did something.
I've never met a man in my lifetime who had more pride than Oscar Robertson. Oscar Robertson would not lose a horse game. And if he did, he was upset. Everything with Oscar is about winning.
Think of excellence. You think if we were playing a basketball game, we set up pick and roll, and I initiate the play, and you're picking for me, you don't roll to the basket. Why even do the pick and roll? I mean, you know, or if you continue to go through certain plays and you keep making mistakes, then, you know, you get upset. You know, so what are you doing out here? You know, if we call a play and you're not executing, there's no sense in calling a play. And I think that players have to challenge themselves mentally sometimes on the court. You know, I mean, I don't see how a player can keep playing and keep making the same mistake all the time. You know, coaches never had to say anything at all. And, you know, and those teams I was on, I thought that when you call a play, especially for someone to shoot, they should execute and get it done properly.
He was a perfectionist. And since most people aren't, when he's talking with his teammates, trying to make sure they win the game, they might have not liked it. But I was, as an observer and playing against him, I could see very clearly it was necessary.
The perfectionist trait drove him as he drove his team. In '64, the Royals won a franchise-best 55 games, second best to the Celtics. Oscar, averaging 31 points, 11 assists, and 9.9 rebounds, a tenth of a rebound short of another seasonal triple-double, was elected regular season MVP. He was the All-Star Game MVP as well, an award he won 3 times in 12 All-Star appearances.
Even in the All-Star game, I mean, he was so much better, so much head and shoulders better than everybody else.
MVP meant Oscar was the focal point of both his team and the opposition's strategy.
Our whole game plan was, let's give Oscar his points. We know we can't stop him. Let's hope that he has to take a few more shots.
Now's the time to let anybody shoot it but Oscar. And that's why his accomplishment of a triple-double and all his other accomplishments are so fabulous because he was double-teamed a lot, the triple team, and he still did it.
Sit down on the bench on the timeout, and his chest is so tired, his whole shirt, uniform was jumping. That's his heart beating. I said, Oscar, they're gonna kill you out there, man. He said, yeah, but we're gonna win this game, though.
I relished trying to come in and guard him. I mean, he was one of my idols, and you know, I was trying to build a reputation, and you do that by guarding the best. He was a consummate player. He had no weaknesses. He played defense, and I think most I admire was his team play. You know, and I patterned my game after him in that respect.
In his drive for excellence, maintaining the edge was compulsive, even in the dead of night when others were trying to sleep.
And I wake up, Oscar's got the ball, lying in bed, working on his release, in bed, shooting the ball, catching it, working on his release. He said, big fella, that ball's got to come off the fingers just right.
Practicing his shot after hours in his bed was as flashy as Oscar got.
The off-the-court story about Oscar was Oscar on the basketball court, and off the court, you never heard anything about Oscar being in the wrong places, doing the wrong things, or being in situations that would cause problems. And that was one of the things about our team at that time. Nobody did that. Of course, you hear many more things about that today, but we didn't make any money in those days either. So you didn't have the problem, you didn't have the opportunity to be out there doing any of those things if you wanted to.
A lot of people would mistake Oscar's personality because Oscar is somewhat shy in a lot of ways.
And I know Wayne Embry, who roomed with him for so many years, told me, even years later, it was very difficult to get to know Oscar because he kind of didn't open himself up.
Had Oscar been a little more outgoing and so on, he could have been the mayor of Cincinnati.
Oscar never showed his personal feelings about things because people were always trying to put him in a goldfish bowl. And Oscar resented that.
When so much of your life is public, you feel that there has to be a part of you that's private, and Oscar is a little bit more so than other people.
His life approach was also his game approach, understated, using fundamentals as his weapon. He lacked in showboat style points. Like another great star of the 60s, less was more.
I never thought I had the flair for running after a foul ball and was 20 rows in the stands. I just didn't think it was necessary for me to do that. That was never my intention to do that, to show my opponent up. I'm sure Oscar felt the same way. I never did see Wilt Chamberlain do it. I never saw Bill Russell do it.
When he went out there, it was to win the game.
Oscar probably had that ability to lull fans and so on and so forth into complacency where they almost didn't think that he was even producing, the great numbers that he was producing. Oscar was just finding the easiest way that he could get 2 points off of his defender.
I read where Oscar's coach didn't allow him to be fancy with the basketball. When I was in college, I had a similar coach, just plain vanilla.
There are obvious skills and there are subtle skills. The obvious skills, they keep stats on. But the subtle skills are what win games. And all the great players, their subtle skills outweigh their obvious skills.
He didn't waste movements, neither did I. Every move I made had a purpose. So today you see a lot of guys between the leg, behind the back, and they're in the same position. So if you're gonna do that, go someplace, don't stay in the same place.
It was a kind of cool that would be maybe associated with the controlled coolness of black jazz music and black jazz artists of the 50s and 60s. Everything was subtle, everything was style in a different sense, not style in the flashiness sense, but style in the sense of controlled, modulated performance.
But sports reporters looking for daily material weren't necessarily fans of the cool jazz approach.
He was not controversial. That's the main thing. That's what they call boring. When you're not controversial, you're boring.
No tattoos, no problems, no antics, just total domination consistently night in, night out.
Understood by his peers and statistically by the media, individual honors accumulated, but the team that had been the Celtics' primary threat faded, and with the losses, the head coaches vanished.
That change doesn't help meld a good team.
Oscar's fifth head coach in 9 seasons was Bob Cousy.
I was excited about Cousy coming to Cincinnati. I think everybody was, but it turned out to be the wrong thing. It turned out to be a very dark beginning for basketball in Cincinnati.
Bob Cousy has a tremendous ego. That can be good, it can be bad.
Cousy wanted to change everything in Cincinnati. He wanted to start over.
In 2 years, there was only one player left on the team when he started.
And consequently, basketball in Cincinnati professionally just went into the dumps.
There was so much change and upheaval. He was trying to get people to play his style of ball, and good or bad, it didn't work.
As the tension mounted, the local paper reported a feud between the two Royals stars.
Columnists write. You know, they want to write about something and they'd like to create something, I think, but that was never there.
He kept thinking I used to have something against Jerry Lucas, which I never did. I mean, Jerry's a friend of mine today.
I mean, there was never a problem there, ever. And that's just something that was written about and talked about. It never surfaced. You never saw it on the court. He and I never had any harsh words with each other. We never had a problem with each other. It was just something that I guess people wanted to write about because it never existed.
But the reports were followed by the breakup.
That began with trading me
to the San Francisco Warriors for Jim King and Bill Turner. From 1964 through 68, Lucas had averaged a rare 20-20, 20 points, 20 rebounds. Baltimore head coach Gene Shue told the Cincinnati Enquirer, "What kind of deal is that? We were prepared to make a much stronger offer than they received." Head coach Cousy replied, "Mind your own business."
Obviously later trading Oscar.
Oscar was actually traded twice, initially to Baltimore for Gus Johnson.
He had a no-trade clause. No trade could be made without his consent. And frankly, I think the Royals forgot all about it. And when they called Oscar in one day and told him he had been traded to Baltimore for Gus Johnson, Oscar remembered it. If they didn't, he immediately came down to see my father. We informed the Royals of the trade restriction. It so totally changed the leverage of the situation. He sat down and figured out what teams could win an NBA championship. That was his sole criteria as to where he wanted to go.
And I remember April 21st, 1970, he was traded to the Milwaukee Bucks. And I kept thinking, if we're trading away the greatest player, who do we get in return? Flynn Robinson and Charlie Polk. Flynn, the Electric Eye Robinson, and Charlie Polk, who I think was in the Marines. So it wasn't a real good deal for us. It probably scarred my childhood. I think I was 14 at the time when the Big O left town.
I never had that many letters before or since from fans saying that I was right, that Oscar was okay, and the Royals were wrong.
But veteran members of the media backed Cousy and the trade.
Joe Axelson, the Royals general manager, has looked through the Royals scrapbook and is well aware of Oscar's past holdouts and the bitterness and rancor that developed. Axelson doesn't want any of it. Neither does Cousy. There are some Oscar Robertson worshipers in this town who think that the Big O is an institution above any kind of reproach or criticism and certainly above being traded. This also is rubbish. Jim Shuttlecotty, Cincinnati Enquirer. Bob Cousy had done everything possible to placate the Big O, whose mood is always the same, bitter. For years, Oscar privately has scorned the Royals management. He has ridiculed Cincinnati and its fans. He has knocked other players, both on his team and others. He's never been willing to pay a compliment. He has been, and probably will grow old, a bitter man, convinced that it all is a plot. Barry McDermott, Cincinnati Enquirer.
When I tell people about what happened to me, and when I grew up, when I went in college, high school, in the pros, I'll just, oh, he's bitter. Well, am I bitter because someone talks about these things and I tell them the truth? I don't think that's been bitter. I'll never forget once a reporter said that I was very opinionated. As a young man, see, I'm not opinionated because things happen to me. I said, you're opinionated because you didn't experience any of these things. That's you never. All you know about is you're a writer. You didn't know. None of these things happened to you. So you can't talk from first-hand experience.
The Royals played 2 more seasons in Cincinnati, posting dismal records of 16 and 22 games under 500. Polk lasted 1 season, Robinson 2. In 1973, the Royals became the Kansas City Omaha Kings. Milwaukee, on the other hand, with Oscar, was about to encounter its finest years.
Somebody got a great deal of that, and somebody lost a professional basketball team out of that trade.
He said, we're going to go to Milwaukee. I will never go anywhere, without you. We're going to move. And when we went there, for the first time, Jake and Shirley went with us. We met the owner, who was a kind of different kind of a person. And it was like a new beginning.
Rivals around the league interpreted the new beginning as the 71 race had a new contender, maybe a new favorite.
They just united the pair of great players together, Oscar and Kareem, and that it was Oscar's chance to win a championship.
I was happy for him because I knew where he was. He wasn't getting along with the coach. There were problems, and he didn't seem to be happy playing basketball like he used to. So I knew once he left that scenario that he and Kareem could be a formidable duo.
And his impact on Milwaukee obviously was very evident.
I was very happy when we got news that Oscar was traded to the Bucks because I knew we'd have really excellent play at that position. I was aware of Oscar's excellence and the fact that he was really underappreciated because he had never played on the World Championship team as a professional.
He didn't want to be kind of this phenomenon who averaged a triple-double. He wanted to be a floor general. He wanted to be a leader. He wanted to be a winner. And he had to get traded and had to sacrifice his game to become that.
He said, I'm going to play on this team. He said, I'm not going to make as many points as I have my whole career, but it will be different. And it'll be good.
I told the guys in doing some training camps that we're going to win. They said, how you know? I said, because I said, you watch, just watch. We're going to win.
Also traded to the Bucks during the offseason, Bob Boozer.
Oscar was orchestrated. He and Kareem were working like two fine tenors.
He was able to run our offense and consistently get good shots for a number of different people, not just myself.
The way you become a great team, you make the weakest link stronger. And I'm sorry, Greg, you're watching this, but I had to get Greg Smith in the game, where he could average 10, 11 points a game.
Smith averaged 11 points, guard John McLaughlin 15, and forward Bob Dandridge 18. The Bucks put together 3 long winning streaks, 16 in a row early, then 10 straight to the All-Star break. After the break, the Bucks won an NBA record 20 consecutive games, finishing with the best record in NBA history. Oscar averaged 20 points and 8 assists. Alcindor won the league MVP and scoring title, averaging 31 points and 16 rebounds.
When I saw Kareem, as a young coach, I knew he was going to get better. And I'll never forget once I was talking to Kareem. He used to be very upset because people fouled him. I said, Kareem, if you were not a great player, they wouldn't touch you. And I told him he had to learn to pass the ball to be a great player. That's because you handle the ball so much, you got to learn to get the double team off of you. And he really did.
I was glad to be able to learn from Oscar and be of benefit to Oscar at that point.
But best record did not equal world title. First round playoff opponent, the Warriors. The Bucks won in 5 games. Next, the LA Lakers, Wilt versus Lou, West versus the Big O. The Bucks dominated, winning the Western Division title again in 5 games. Milwaukee would play Baltimore for the World Championship. The Bucks won the first 3 games.
Hi everyone, this is Jack Twyman. Welcome to the Civic Center in Baltimore, Maryland. Tonight, the Milwaukee Bucks and Oscar Robertson are in position to capture the one honor that has eluded the Big O in his illustrious career, a World's Championship.
10 minutes to go, third quarter. Carter, number 3, driving on McLaughlin, trying to get around Alcindor. Can't. Lou gets the rebound. Robertson. An assist to Greg Smith, a man with peripheral vision, unbelievable.
Here's that fast break run by Oscar Robertson. Watch how he slows up, allowing the forwards to get down. Then he hits Greg Smith with a blind pass. He was looking the other way. You just saw the master at his craft. Oscar Robertson on a fast break.
They get my vote for tremendous athletes. Oscar Robertson finding the range from 25. John McLaughlin for Milwaukee gives to Dandridge. Alcindor. Impossible to stop. Alcindor to Robertson.
The clock was just running out on that one. That was a tough shot by Marin. He just tried to get it up there.
There you are again.
Funny thing, you play a position like guard all your life. The things you think about in the court is just unbelievable. You feel people around you. When you're dribbling the basketball, you feel people behind you, so you make moves to get away. And you feel the momentum of the game swing, and you know who's scoring for you. You know whose player on your team can beat that defensive player.
Fred Carter challenged Oscar. First game, he said, "Give me the ball, I've got Oscar." He shouldn't have said that. And Oscar made it a point to crush Fred for the rest of the series.
There's another ABC angle, low camera from behind, giving you the idea of how Robertson moved in. Look at that. 27 points for Oscar.
The players' wives did not travel with the team in the 1970s. Yvonne watched the game on television in Milwaukee.
The wives had been going to each other's homes to watch the games. And for that game, they all came to my house.
At the end of three quarters, the Bucks led by 13, as the wives and national television audience spent the break watching commercials featuring unknown actors hoping for a shot at the big time.
I just wish it had worked better for me. If your antiperspirant doesn't do what you hired it to, fire yours.
The Bucks prepared their final quarter sweep to the title.
Robertson guarded by Jack Marin. Alcindor. Oh. Capped away by Allen. Robertson controlling it. Look at that lead pass to Dandridge. Robertson, he must have 4 or 5 eyes. Boy, 30 points for the Big O. And I've just received word that Sport Magazine has awarded the NBA Playoff Award, Most Valuable Player, to Lou Alcindor. It's a shame they didn't have 2 to give number 1 one. The Milwaukee Bucks are the champions.
There's the Big O! Oscar, congratulations. Yeah, thanks, Jack. Big win for you. What do you feel? Is this better than the days that you've seen? Oh, this is great. It's great, Jack. Finally got it. This is 11 years in coming, right? A long time, Jack. How do you feel? Oh, I feel wonderful. Great victory. Had a great team game. Big fella. Hey, Luke. Big fella. Luke, congratulations. Oscar just paid you a great compliment. You had a great series. Congratulations. He was a big help. He was a big help. Listen, Oscar played a hell of a game today.
Oscar made my life easier, and it was good to know that I made his life easier and, put something in there that was special. It was special for both of us. For me to be that successful that early in my career was a great feather in my cap, and I couldn't have done it without having Oscar on the team.
And then he did something so great in all of that tumult. He called me. But just to think he was thoughtful enough that he called.
Probably the happiest I've seen Oscar playing professional basketball that year. In particular, just everything he wanted to have happened, I think. Even the fact that it was Twyman that interviewed him, to have an old teammate back from the Royals, everything sort of came around for him.
As for the young Lou Alcindor, who would change his name and as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar become the all-time leading scorer in NBA history, his primary memory was not of the sweep or even of his MVPs.
I remember that Oscar had been always in intense competition with Bob Boozer, and all of a sudden they were teammates, and they won the World Championship together. That was a very ironic thing for Oscar, because he always wanted to beat Kansas State, and when he played at Cincinnati, and their little ongoing rivalry was pretty funny.
And the rivalry was settled in that championship. That was Boozer's final game. 3 years later, the Bucks lost Game 7 in the finals to Oscar's nemesis, the Celtics. Oscar retired.
He retired well. We lived in Milwaukee the year after he retired, and he kind of withdrew gradually because that year he did some TV, and so he still got to travel a lot. He got to see his friends. He got to see the game.
In 1979, 3 men in their first year of eligibility were inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame. Jerry Lucas, Jerry West, and Oscar Robertson.
That was a thrill. You think of one of your old buddies from the old hood, as they say nowadays, is in the Hall of Fame. That spoke volumes for everything. Us, as a group, from whence he cometh, that just spoke volumes. Because to think a little guy from Colton Street could go from there to the Hall of Fame of basketball, it's quite an accomplishment.
No one debated his Hall of Fame status, but Oscar was a member of a debate, the most exclusive debate.
Unequivocally the most versatile player to ever play the game. You know, he could defend, he could rebound, he could score at will, and he could lead a team. So to me, I think he's, a lot of people say Jordan is the best guard to ever play the game, but you know, I saw Oscar Robertson play. I think he's perhaps the best player at the backcourt position.
He might not have been as flashy as Michael, but I'll tell you one thing, he could do everything that anybody could do.
When they pick the 10 best players and they pick the 4 best guards, it will always be Oscar, Michael Jordan, Jerry West, and Magic Johnson. And he'll always be one of the top, 10 players, whoever played the game. And then when will say Michael Jordan was the greatest player in the history of the game, well, the guy that he had to top was Oscar Robertson.
I think Oscar ranks number one. I also played with Irvin Johnson, and he was no slouch either. It's kind of hard to differentiate. We're talking about two of the people who are in the top 3 or 4 or 5 all-time assists. That's a very, very rarefied atmosphere. So playing with both of them was special, but I played with Oscar first, and it was, I think, a very special time.
I've never seen a better basketball player.
Michael was a scoring machine, and he was an attack player, whereas Oscar could take that scoring in the fourth quarter, distribute it around to everybody else in the first 3 quarters, and play that different type of team game. And it was a different era. And I find it real hard to compare stars from different eras in today's game, because it's not fair to the athletes of that era or the athletes of this era.
I think the Big O, even to this day, kind of challenges a little bit that Michael's the greatest ever. And the Big O has reason to say that.
Oscar was the epitome of, for me, the way basketball was meant to be played.
What do you need tonight? 12 rebounds? Got it. 10 assists? Got it. 30 points? Got it.
He was the greatest player in what I consider to be the greatest era of basketball. For this reason alone, I would say, for me, he's the greatest figure in the game's history.
Oscar and Jordan were among the 50 voted to the NBA's 50th anniversary team in 1997. But on-the-court performance is only a portion of his story. Perhaps it's what happened off the court that separates Oscar.
You needed somebody as your out front that was very visible and very articulate and very intelligent, and Oscar was all of those.
We had a good association during those days because guys were striving for something. They were striving for better pension, better hospitalization, better air travel, better meal money. When we first got started, meal money was only $8 a day. I taped my own ankles. You don't get hurt, because if you got hurt, you never got back into the lineup hardly.
He initiated and was the named plaintiff in a suit that invalidated the equivalent of the baseball's reserve clause.
In the days prior to Oscar Robertson, the players did not have a voice, did not have a role in what the game was all about, in the business of basketball.
The name of the suit is Oscar Robertson versus NBA. The result of the suit was to invalidate the option clause in the standard NBA agreement, free agency.
When Oscar came along and stepped forward and put his career, his name, really his life on the line, he made it possible for all of us to enjoy the incredible riches and the incredible greatness that the game has brought to each and every one of us today.
In 1975, he retired as president. Utilizing the experience of running the association and his business degree, he started his own company. Orchem is a manufacturer providing cleaning accessories for companies and restaurants nationally. Headquartered in suburban Cincinnati, he remained visible throughout the city.
I'll tell you, first time I ever laid eyes on a Madison Square Garden, but he lit it up for 56 against Seton Hall, my alma mater. 56 outscored the entire Seton Hall team.
With Vitale working the airways and a legion of fans working the nostalgia grapevine, the legend was bronzed in 1994.
That's all you need to say. Oh, that's the Big O. And there are other players who have used that nickname. There's only one Big O. Just don't kid anybody. He's the Big O. And he's got a statue to prove it.
The statue was the idea of UC alums Rod Nall and Gary Wachs. Oscar resisted.
I didn't want to be beholden to anyone to donate money for something from me. And I didn't want that. So I go downtown, I tell Rod, I said, well, Rod, we had a couple of conversations about it, and I said, I don't think I want to do this. You know, I said, first of all, you usually put up statues when you're dead. And so I said, I'm still here for the time being.
But close friend Bob Brown convinced Oscar. Brown revealed that his father, J.W. Jake Brown, who had been Oscar's attorney since 1956, was gravely ill within months of his death and wanted to leave a gift to Oscar. Jake Brown bankrolled the statue.
The greatest Bearcat of all time, ladies and gentlemen, Oscar Robertson.
UC provided a prime location and a ceremony which would ignite the release of buried emotions Oscar had rarely shared privately and had never shared publicly.
Thank you very much. You know, I thought this was going to be an easy night, but, you know, I don't know now. So I'm going to say a thank you to Jake Brown before we get started. Time is slipping by. But I have more to say outside, so I'm going to take up more of your time. Thanks a lot.
The ceremony then moved outside the Shoemaker Center for the public unveiling, and 20,000 people jammed the area.
If you lived in Cincinnati between September of 1956 and June of 1960, then attending a UC basketball game was an extraordinary and highly coveted privilege. There you saw the finest player of his time, Oscar Robertson. Here he stands today, larger than life. Much as he played back then, larger than life. Exceptional, even great athletes are now commonplace, but to be the very best remains an elusive honor.
Oscar was the very best, and we hope that his image leads those who follow him to this arena and to this university to also be the very best.
And then Oscar spoke.
Thank you. For being a UC student, you learn fast. I learned that I was on stage all the time, no matter what I did, whether it's in the classroom or out of the classroom. And going to bars, folks, and believe me, folks, college students drink beer and eat pizza. I paved the way, but I was still naive. It has been said many times that God never puts more on you than you can handle. But believe me, you're tested often, and you're tested often again. My playing conduct at the university helped set the stage for easing racial conditions here at the university. There were some bad times for me at the university. Went to North Carolina, played in the Dixie Classics. Before I left, I got a nice note from the Imperial Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan telling me not to play. We went to Houston. I didn't stay in the hotel with the team. It was the longest ride of my life coming back to the university. Sorry. They put a black cat in my locker room in North Texas.
I think anytime you reflect back on things that happened, not that they hurt you physically, but the emotional hurt sometimes is much greater than anything you can suffer, really.
The statue itself. Blair Buswell, who took off 20 pounds and 20 years off of my life when you see this. I thank you for that.
But what does the statue stand for? It stands for pride in athletics. It stands for prestige and honor of being a successful athlete. It stands for greater sensitivity. It stands for hard work, sweat, and pain, and tears too. Trying to be a better athlete, better student athlete. It stands for maturity. The statue is Oscar Robertson, but it's for you, and you, and especially you. That's for everybody.
I realized that what I did was for all the ones who were going to come after me.
He had a hurt and a joy, and they both collided. And the tears came out of one eye was for the joy, and the tears came out of other eyes was some of that bad and ugly that happened to him along the way of getting here.
I'm the most fortunate Bearcat of all. Thank you.
See, I read the Bible a lot. Whatever you do here on earth, I mean, before you die, somebody, you're going to tell somebody going to know what happened. So it's got to come out. You can't keep it concealed for the rest of all your life.
And that was his night?
That was his night to let it go.
He wasn't just talking to talk. That was coming from his heart.
It was so important to him because there were so many injustices that had happened. It was almost like it was righted for a period of time.
1, 2, 3, now.
At the time of this initial public offering of emotion, only the family knew Oscar's middle daughter, Tia, was suffering with a debilitating disease.
She had lupus for, I guess, 4 years that I knew of before the surgery. And Oscar would talk about it from time to time. And I knew it preyed on him.
Tia needed a kidney transplant. Doctors said Oscar and his oldest daughter, Shauna, were compatible donors.
But that was a subject that Oscar didn't allow any debate on. He said he was the one who was going to do it, and that was, and he wouldn't even discuss it.
Oscar felt that he was a father, and it was his duty to do it.
Intent on keeping it a private family matter, the Robertsons checked into University Hospital April 10, 1997, under the alias Oscar Panama and Tia Paradise.
I had some great doctors, Dr. First, who was wonderful, although Dr. Whiting did the operation. As a matter of fact, before he's going to operate, I asked him how many of these did he do. He said he did a lot of them. So I said, well, you're fine with me then. I didn't want any newcomer. I didn't want that at all.
Everything was a success except keeping it a secret. A local paper broke what turned out to be a national story.
Well, she's my daughter, you know, so you don't talk about a lot of things. You know the problem. We've gone through it for a long time and through the process of elimination to get to me. So it's not a lot of conversation because we knew what was going to happen. Went through Dr. Cotton here. Just had to have to do. I'll do it again.
When you get older, you cry a lot. You know, when you're younger man, you know, you just get mad and PO'd, man. You don't cry a lot. When you get older, yeah, it gets to you, man.
because you see people grow up. I thought about my daughter, you know, she was having some difficulties, you know, real difficulties. But you know, more than that, I thought about people on dialysis machines and whatnot who don't have a chance to live. You know, it's sad. See, we live in a world where if we're not directly involved in the situation, we don't think about it at all. Only until it faces you head on. And every family in America faces problems, difficult problems. And how you manage those problems is the way you live.
Today, Tia lives a healthy life. She plays tennis in the transplant games, where Oscar is a spokesman, not only for the games, but also for the Kidney Foundation.
All of you are my heroes forever. Thank you.
In 1997, he was named National Father of the Year.
Exemplified all that is good about competitive professional sports, but also as a loving and caring and very touching father. It was for those reasons, or that reason, that Oscar was singled out.
I asked for a picture of Oscar, the famous picture of him at Cincinnati, a rebound where his legs are spread and he's up near the rim, and the Big O signed that for me. And I wanted his autograph not because he was a Hall of Fame player, but what he did as a parent for his daughter. That meant more to me. And I got emotional when I went back to Cincinnati for a night when he was honored. And thinking of my 3 daughters, could I do that? He gave the gift of life. I have the autograph picture in my office here at ESPN.
Country born and city raised in the ghetto, coming up the tough way, shotgun house on Colton Street, the shooting dice open, carrying on in our vicinity. Look, don't touch, mama said, look, don't do. Hard scrabble ball on the concrete courts of the Dust Bowl songs through. Pressure makes the diamond. That's what I believe. Life's many scars are the facets it leaves. He jumped the tip of the free throw line. This time, still getting Robertson. Clears the line. Every school holiday, back to Grandpa's farm for us. Daddy said, be sure you stay in the back of the bus. I didn't see why until one day we stopped for a bite. The man said, you can't eat here, boy, you ain't white. Pour your heart into the part you have to play. What life gives us, we don't always have a say. Use the gifts you have to help us make a change. Life is wonderful, strange. Pressure makes a diamond.
I'm the most fortunate Bearcat of all. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. This is Oscar Robertson. Let's do the Big O. Hey, everybody come and gather around. good fight. And it's a brand new thing that's really alive. Here's a thing that's really gonna go, the big old.
Pressure makes the diamond. That's what I believe. Life's many scars are the facets it leaves.